Thank you for the very kind introduction. I'm here with an exciting team to discuss staking for a panel called Serious About Staking. So first things I want to do is kind of go around and have everyone introduce themselves and define staking. So if we could start with Amrit, please, and then just go around the table.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Amrit. I'm the President and Chief Scientific Officer at Zilliqa. Zilliqa is a blockchain platform with smart contract features, so it allows people to develop dApps on it. So for me, staking, I would define it in the following way. So staking is something that you put on the table, something that you, as a skin in the game, that allows you to have access to do certain things. So it could be, for example, process or validate transactions. It could be, for example, make certain decisions, governance decisions, for example. It could be to provide other services that not everyone can provide. And that skin in the game is the base layer which is staking. So it makes sure that people have enough skin in the game to provide the right service and to do the right job.
Great, thank you. Naveed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Naveed Isanola, Head of Engineering Research at Elrond. Elrond is a pure proof-of-stake blockchain project. In fact, we made that launched about a year ago. And I think what we're really excited by is we have a platform that scales to the entire planet while maintaining all the aspects of decentralization and security that we require, especially for our financial transactions. So how do I define staking? Well, I really like Emret's definition. So let me just build off his idea of skin in the game. Staking is this concept that you, by participating meaningfully in some system, you get some benefits and you also have some responsibilities. I think specifically around blockchain, we care about governance. We want a voice in governance. We want a voice in validation of blocks typically. And our rewards can be monetary. They can be based on the crypto assets that are underneath it, or they can also be other types of rewards as well. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for joining us. And now from the Elrond team, please.
Hi guys, great to be here. I'm Lucian, I'm co-founder of Elrond. Elrond is a blockchain that tries to solve the scalability through secure proof of stake and sharding. Coming back to your question and to add a little bit on what the others said is this idea that the security of the network in case of secure proof of stake and proof of stake in general doesn't come from rewards, but basically from penalties. So basically this skin in the game is what secure actually the network. Also, I will add on that the idea of the efficiency of proof of stake. We just take a look at the numbers and if you just take, let's say, first two proof of work blockchains and you look at the cost of the infrastructure to maintain those, we can see and compare those to already let's say existing proof of stake, we can see that proof of stake is like 10 times cheaper to maintain the cost of the infrastructure. So basically this would be my point here.
And staking is something that a lot of the venture firms in the space have been looking at for the last year or so, and something that they're very excited about as a way for them to have a stake in these networks. And so I think it's important that, especially for people, the retail public, to kind of start thinking about what staking is and what it means to them as this niche within the blockchain industry matures. So I guess we'll just maintain the same order to answer the questions. And the next question I have for the panel today is what is surprising, ironic, novel, or controversial about staking in the present day? Emre, please.
Yeah, so there are many different factors when you consider staking, right? Obviously, it's a new kid on the block, so it's not something that has been existing since the birth of blockchain. So it's very new. I would say that it has been in real practice and adoption in the last, I would say, year or two, basically. Though some people have implemented a version of proof of stake probably earlier than that. And I would say that the chain that has kind of pushed and showed that this is something that has actual potential and people can actually use it and have actually created the right sort of adoption for these sort of staking is Tezos, for example. And so it has certainly created that interest in the blockchain community that this is something that can be interesting for people to look into. However, I do feel that there are certain problems and there are certain challenges that proof of stake, also, of course, there are different models. So proof of stake and proof of work kind of works in different models in some sense. And because of those models, things are sort of different in some sense. For example, if you look at traditional, for example, BFT protocols, our friends from Elrond, are using some protocol of similar nature. For example, BFT protocols that are actually used in consensus, for example, they have a very different security model, for example, where the security model is basically that anyone which is Byzantine can attack the system, for example, and the system should be secure under that assumption, right? That you don't have enough number of, the network that's actually validating transactions doesn't have too many of those Byzantine nodes. Now, in staking, things are slightly different because it becomes slightly more economic, right? Because then you get economic guarantees that the probability that, or the security that this block will be secure and be processed in the right way, it depends on how much economic penalty can be imposed on this block in some way. And so, yeah, there are different considerations there. And so the guarantee, in some sense, depending on how you design your proof of stake mechanism, the guarantee that you get could be different in some sense. The last point is also about how you actually use staking. And for example, at Zilliqa, we are not a proof of stake based chain, unlike Elrond and Elrond. We are using staking in a very particular way, which is basically so if you're familiar with Ethereum, Ethereum has what's called inferior nodes, for example. And inferior nodes are not really consensus nodes, so they are nodes that allow you to connect to the network, but they do not process transactions, right? And so what we are doing, in our chain is that our chain is still proof of work plus PBFT, which is a classical Byzantine fault tolerance protocol, but we use consensus for these inferior nodes to make sure that these inferior nodes behave correctly and they're incentivized to provide the service. So yeah, I would say that there are different flavors to staking as well, and they both have sort of pros and cons compared to proof of work or traditional BFT protocols.
Thank you. Go ahead, Naveed.
Emma, once again, it's great going after you because you do the bulk of the work for all of us by explaining the context. So thank you for your for your explanation. So once again, building off of what he said, I think what's interesting about staking, I'd actually like to back up a little bit. Why does anyone care about staking? I think we care about staking because we care about security and we care about participation. And those two are very, very connected, especially in the blockchain world. If you have a system where only some small portion of the population secures it, whether it's miners, whether it's delegates, whether it's a carved off specialized entity that only they are allowed to stake, then you have arguably perverse incentives for that subgroup to do something that's good for them, but maybe not necessarily for the whole. So I'd actually like to think of staking as a way for the entire population of the system to participate and secure it. And this is one of the things that at Elrond with pure proof of stake, where everyone participates, not just someone who has the $7,500 equivalent to post the 32 ETH to be in the Ethereum staking system, or some of the other ones have on their own rules about who can get in. We want to make sure it's open. We want to make sure it's as inclusive as possible, because by spreading the load and responsibility as widely as possible, I think we get the best staking guarantees. And going specifically to your question about what's surprising is staking, especially as staking as a service, can be, if not implemented well, another form of centralization. You now potentially have staking providers in the cloud that are aggregating our responsibility and taking it on themselves and creating clusters and pockets of value with a stronger voice. Now, presumably with slashing and other mechanisms, you can ensure that they behave responsibly, that they do a great job of representing you, but every single time there's some indirection, some of your message may get lost in those nodes. And the other specific piece about staking that I want to bring up is, it's brought up twice here without using the word. Slashing, I don't think necessarily is a required piece of staking. At Elrond, we don't actually slash. So if you have stake in the system, you're a participant in the system, but instead of punishing bad behavior, which requires enumerating bad behavior and identifying it, we try to make it mathematically impossible for bad behavior to happen. And that's the sort of core of Byzantine agreement and pure proof of stake. And with that, I yield to Lucian.
Thank you. Thank you. One thing that is a little bit different in how Elrond is using staking, besides the obvious use cases, as mentioned, for validating the network and all of that, is one direction that's actually we put a lot of effort recently, is how can we use staking in a different way. And what I mean is, for example, as a collateral to provide, for example, algorithmic stable tokens. And why this is a very interesting approach for us, because if we are able to do this at a protocol level, we can from this point we can expand to a different kind of approach where you can have a blockchain where, for example, you are able to the cost of the resources can be used with attached to a stable coin. On the other hand, what we are seeing with this approach is a very big issue for newcomers in the blockchain space. For example, on Ethereum, when you want to transfer a stable coin, USDC, USDT, you have to pay the fees in a different from coin in Ether. So basically, we are looking how staking can be used also as a collateral, how we can price the cost in a stable coin or stable token, and more on that. The idea that any transfer, the fee for any transfer can actually be paid in the token you are transferring. So by doing this, you kind of solve some of the big issues on adoption, especially for newcomers. And on the other hand, you solve one other potential big issue is the volatility. We know one of the biggest promise we had with the blockchain is this idea of how we can make the financial system a better financial system, how we can bring payments to the underbanked or underbanked people. And definitely there are a lot of things that still need to be solved, and definitely staking can also be used more than just securing the network itself, but as mentioned in other interesting other cases. And this is something that for us is really important, and this combination is something that we work on and hopefully will be available really soon.
Justin, if
I think
if I may add
please.
3 quick points on this. I think there are some interesting points that Naveed mentioned as well, which is one is staking is evolving. Probably a year ago, staking could not have imagined without slashing. So slashing was kind of obvious to have in staking, and now we are seeing some protocols being created where slashing is not necessary. And these are kind of important design decisions because, as I said earlier, it's all about economics in some sense. It boils down to that in the end. And we are also seeing some trends as well. Now that we have a few blockchains that are actually live with mainnet, with staking, we're also seeing some real world and practical trends as well. How people are interacting with staking chains as well. For example, I was reading an article on Tezos, for example, and apparently the top 3 biggest validators on Tezos right now are exchanges. They are Binance, Coinbase, Binance, and Kraken. And that's something that also is very interesting in some sense, because even though Tezos and like many other chains, staking chains as well, they provide this delegation. So you don't necessarily need, Naveed mentioned earlier that in Ethereum, for example, you need 32 ETH to be able to be a staker in some sense. While in Tezos, you don't necessarily need that. So you can, for example, you can delegate your tokens and yet be able to participate in that network. And yet you're still seeing a lot of, validators are actually sort of centralizing some of these parties. So this also kind of begs the question is how people are, and even then, some of these exchanges are actually charging fees to these people. So they can charge up to, let's say, 15% or 25% sometimes to these people who actually dedicate their tokens to these exchanges. So that's some other component that I feel is very interesting. And the third point that I would like to mention about economics is about these DeFi applications coming up, which also provide users a very interesting way to earn rewards, for example. And if in that case, you have to make sure that your, let's say, monetary policy at the base layer should be compatible in some sense with respect to DeFi. For example, let's say you have a lending borrowing application on your platform, and if that gives you an interest rate which is, let's say, 10%, and if your staking rewards gives you only 5%, then things become slightly more dynamic and very, very interesting in some sense, if you're looking at security perspective. So a lot of these things are actually, we are seeing right now when things are being deployed, and these are just lessons that we're learning, along our way, I would say. And this is really interesting to see where we are right now.
If I may add a little point here is, for example, with Elrond, from a staking provider point of view, we don't use like a smart contract, the protocol level. We give to any staking provider the ability to actually deploy its own delegation smart contract. And we believe by opening this to the imagination of the staking providers, they will be able to create new use cases and bring some new ways of staking, where you can, for example, as you mentioned, by connecting some DeFi products together with a staking solution. Also, we are definitely looking into other kind of approaching, like kind of soft staking, where, for example, you are able through a wallet or through different other mechanisms, depending on the mechanics of the product. It's definitely targeted to user. You can find different other ways to actually use kind of staking in a different way that some in a certain level also bring more decentralization, as you mentioned, in all blockchains, centralization, even if it's proof of work, proof of stake. This is an issue, and however you want to put it. Although we are at the very beginning, all the numbers shows that in time there is some kind of centralization and the rich get richer. But definitely there are mechanisms and ways that you can design a system where those things kind of push things in different direction, and at some point they might be more balanced.
I'd like to add a little bit too, especially in light of the additional context that Lucian and Amrit put down. The first is it's definitely evolving, and I think that's actually pretty exciting. We get to see it evolve in real time and hopefully react to it to help ensure that it tries to stay as decentralized as possible. I think human systems have a tendency towards centralization, so working out incentives where decentralization is still part of it is going to be a challenge. But this evolution is really interesting to me. One thing that I think helps on the promoting decentralization is massively lowering the barrier to staking, right? Some systems are so complicated on the infrastructure IT level that you need someone who's got network experience, can manage a cloud server for you, or some other sort of complexity. And the power involved as well is costly, and so you want to offload that. Elrond, we want to make it as trivial as possible to enter, so a smartphone or a Raspberry Pi is easily able to be a participant and have manage your stake, even if you're not delegating it, which of course you can. And the other piece of this is staking. I don't want, and I think at Elrond, we don't believe in taking and sequestering your money and staking that. We want all your money to be hot in your wallet and usable. If you have it, it's staked, but you don't create a savings account and a checking account where one generates rewards and only one you can actively spend. And Elrond, all the value that you have is available while simultaneously generating the full participation that it can.
Thank you, everyone, for the additional context there. So we've got just under 20 minutes left, and I wanted to know, starting with Emre, is there any breaking news that you're keeping an eye on when it comes to staking currently?
Yeah, I'm presently, this is something that Lucian, I think, sort of hinted at, which is there's a trend right now, which where if you see the staking space, where you have bigger players like, let's say, exchanges, and then you have validators from community, for example, who are running nodes. What I'm really interested in see, because some of these exchanges are so powerful that they can offer, for example, they can take zero cut and yet be able to offer staking to delegate staking, for example, to their clients. And this is where I think it's become exciting for these validators, because these validators could potentially have to somehow differentiate themselves and be able to attract delegators towards their platforms and towards their systems. And what I'm looking at is, just to be able to lock your tokens, just to be able to transfer your tokens to a contract is just not enough, because you're not able to extract value from that. It's just locked and nothing happens from there. But for example, if you look at, let's say, banking industry, for example, though it's a bit shady, or it works in a slightly different way, but the idea is that when you put your money in a bank, the bank can do something with that money. So it can build products based on the money that you have deposited in some sense. And this is where what we're seeing in some trends where people are building products that are based on those staked tokens. So tokens that are sitting in a contract or that have been logged in a contract. You can, for example, issue wrapped versions of tokens of your own native tokens and then use it for example, lending borrowing, for example. So the chain doesn't stop just at the staking, it actually continues beyond staking. And this is something that probably Lucian or Naveed hinted at as well. And I think I'm really excited about what happens when these validators become creative and build products that are based on those staked or locked tokens in some sense.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that, Emre. So I think the DeFi implementers are coming up with these cool constructions on top of our platform. Really, it's them who's driving adoption and making the space such an interesting one to play in. We're just giving them tools that they can hopefully leverage. One other thing that I'm keeping an eye on when it comes to the staking world is these staking providers have a unique place in the ecosystem when it comes to all these blockchains. They're actually nexuses between all the different blockchains in some way. They have expertise in Cosmos and Polkadot and Algorand and Elrond and Zilliqa, et cetera. And as a result, they actually are in a place where they can help with things like interoperability. There's some staking providers that are looking at working collectively in a decentralized fashion as token bridge support or other mechanisms that enable interoperability between chains. And some of that is technology facilitated and some of that is more mechanical in nature. But because they have the nodes, they have the expertise, it's definitely something I'm curious to see where it goes.
So definitely there are a lot of things that we are looking into, and since everything it's at the very beginning, there are a lot of experiments, there is a lot of research, there are great people that are involved in this new industry. So we are basically looking to everything. Definitely one thing that I already mentioned is going beyond staking and see how staking can be like a building block for other things, especially from a user perspective, but definitely for other actors involved in this space. So one thing that we are looking into is, as mentioned, is how this staking can or a version of staking, let's say it like soft staking or other ways of staking, or even delegation, can have multiple functions for someone who wants, for example, to be on Elrond. And even if it's a DeFi that is, for example, developed by others on top of Elrond in our case, or even if it's something like the staking as a reserve, there we can use a collateral, as mentioned before. And more interestingly for us, it's actually going directly to the user and bring this option directly through some products and services that can make more sense to give it to the user. And more than that is this, because if you have like a blockchain that it's something that came up today, like an all-inclusive blockchain, that you've built all the tools that not only help developers to build on top of that, but also the users. Then you have an interesting and I believe a different kind of approach. I would argue that right now in this space we only have, and I'll use a metaphor here, is like the Android kind of approach. Developers first, and the user will come, and others will build. For Elrond, it's a little bit different. Of course, developers are first. We are just adding on top of that also the idea that is users first and developer will follow. So for us, it's really important to go directly to the users, and behind the scene, besides the great technology that is already in the open and tested, for us, we are put a lot of effort in different products and services that we'll bring on pretty soon, that will try to solve all those other things that I mentioned.
Thank you. So With about 3 minutes left each for each person to answer on this next question, I want to talk a little bit about Ethereum 2.0 and its staking capabilities. So we can start with Emrit discussing Ethereum 2.0. And as you mentioned, you need 32 ETH to stake on Ethereum, which is somewhat of a barrier for a lot of people. But just in general, if we could speak about Ethereum 2.0 and its staking capabilities.
Sorry, it's going to be
You're
very
on
different
mute.
from what we have. Yeah, it's going to be very different from what we have seen so far. For example, some of the chains, for example, which allows delegated staking. And what according to a recent survey that Consensus did, apparently those people, so they did a survey on who and in what form you would like to get involved with ETH staking, and those who said that we won't be able to do stake, where basically the reason was that they don't have enough ETH. So it would be interesting to see how people are going to build some of these pools in some sense that will be non-custodial in nature, for example. But yeah, it's going to be very different, different sort of staking model than what we're used to so far.
Yeah, so adding on to that, there's two things about the Ethereum V2 staking model that I definitely keep an eye on, and I think we all will. And that is, the first part is that 32 ETH, $7,500 roughly USD equivalent barrier. What will that have? What sort of impact will that have on selection of who's involved? And if you have these pools that I alluded to, I'm sure will happen, when you have non-algorithmic delegation, what safety is compromised as a result? And then on the other part of that is, slashing is at to core of the protocol in Ethereum V2, and I'm curious to once again to keep my eye on how does that evolve as they identify new threat vectors. And some things are hard to express algorithmically as this is bad behavior. And so it'll be interesting to see once again how slashing evolves, try to keep pace with that or not. Definitely every single time there's a new hot project, we all want to pay attention to how it turns out.
Yeah, so definitely we are taking a close look to what Ethereum is doing. I would say in a funny and also serious way that probably if Ethereum and Vitalik would start from the beginning, from scratch, probably they will do what Elrond is already doing. But definitely for them, it's a transformative journey, and they have a lot of legacy and also high expectations from anyone. I sincerely do hope they succeed. It will take probably more time than expected. This is how things usually goes. But as I said, I do really hope that they will succeed. It will be very important for all of us that are involved in this space for Ethereum at some point to be successful. It will give a sign to all the actors in the space, investors and users, that proof of stake is a part of the future of blockchain. On the other hand, from a technical point of view, definitely we'll have to see, and there are already solutions that are already live. But definitely, it's going to be very interesting how things will go in the next few years.
I wanted to follow up on that question. What should everyone who's not a Ethereum developer know about this transition?
Well, they should certainly know about Zilliqa, what we're trying to do, for example, and other projects as well. I think, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what people are doing, not just in your project, but what other people are doing as well, because there are tons of things to learn from each other actually, and I think there's something that spirit that drives this entire blockchain space.
I think it's hard not to also follow suit in here and say Algorand, with our sort of open and inclusive mechanism towards staking. So if you don't have 32 ETH, you can come to a system that maybe is able to allow you to express your voice a little more readily. On the Ethereum V2 side, something that I think is worth noting, may not be obvious, is you have basically a new blockchain, a new connection point, a new set of value, and as a result, interoperability between ETH and Ethereum V1 and V2 and the rest of the world. Well, you have choices now. Do you just take the easy path to V2 if it's an easy path, or will the world vote differently? And I think we'll see a lot of other projects gain traction once the sort of Ethereum community looks up and realizes they do have choices now.
So in the case of Elrond, for example, one thing that we definitely are doing for the developers is something that is already live and in test and is going to be available at the launch of the mainnet, is this kind of business model that we are already offering to any developer that is building a smart contract. And basically what it means is 30% of all the fees that goes through a smart contract or a dApp that is developed by a third-party developer goes actually to the developer. It's a pretty simple model, but definitely incentivize any developer to have the more popular the dApp is, he's going to get to be part of the success of the network itself, is going to be able to capture some fees. More than that, on Elrond you have this virtual machine that is fully compatible with Elrond, so like porting any smart contract, it's just a matter of hours. We also have a lot of tools and different programming languages that you are able to use in order to build your things. It's a really fast blockchain with negligible cost and easily scalable. I would add on that, for example, one thing that we did is the so-called token standard that we've built on top of Elrond, that basically you are able to issue a token that it's not limited by the scalability of a smart contract. It actually can move at the speed of the native token. So basically, when you need this kind of when you have this blockchain that is really fast, and you want to have like a different approach and issue a different token, you'll have this ability to actually use the full speed of the blockchain and not be limited by the speed of the smart contract itself. We were really curious to see what use cases and what the developers will be able to build once the technical limitations, let's say, are not there. And I'm pretty sure we will be impressed. And it's very hard to predict what others will build once, let's say, the infrastructure problem or the scalability, however you want to put it, is going to be removed, and will let the imagination of the developers and others to actually come up with something that we cannot even imagine right now.
Correct me if I'm wrong too. So any kind of company or app that's running on Ethereum now, let's say like a Bitcoin ATM that also serves Ethereum, will now, once the change is through and they've upgraded to version 2.0, have to then invest developer time and therefore capital into remaining interoperable with Ethereum. Is that correct?
To my understanding, there's not much change required, but maybe Naveed will probably know better than me.
I think because we're talking about Ethereum and Ethereum v2, I actually will defer that to the tech docs. My understanding was somewhat different, but that's a constantly evolving thing, and I don't pretend to be an expert on Ethereum development.
All right, last question. Go ahead, Lucian.
No, I just want to say that I don't want to add anything. Sorry about that.
Yeah, great. So last question, we've got about 3 minutes left, probably a little bit less than that, 2 minutes. Anything that's going on in your projects or that you're keeping an eye on in staking that we haven't discussed yet?
So on our side, we are working on, so we have been working on a new smart contract language that is out there. And we had developed an interpreter for that language. And as you can imagine, interpreters in general are slower than compared to compilers. And now we are working on a compiler that will speed up the transaction processing. So this is something that, I would say one of the biggest projects that we are working on right now to look forward to.
Yeah, there's a couple of things coming down the pipe here with Elrond that I'm really excited by. The first is we're about to do our third major network upgrade. The first was a launch. And then in November, we had the release of Layer 1 asset smart contracts and atomic transactions without needing to write smart contracts. And now we're about to add a lot more state to the blockchain, so you can make much more complicated applications that completely live inside the blockchain world. So that is on the horizon within hopefully a couple of weeks here. And I'm really excited to see how people leverage that to build really fast, world scalable, decentralized applications. On the smart contract front, so my background actually is in programming languages. Prior to Elrond, I led a number of engineering teams at Mozilla, including JavaScript and WebAssembly. And so it was exciting to sort of take a new spin on how do you make a language, how do you make a system that is provably correct and halts. So the really hard problems in the programming language world. I'm really excited by the sort of asynchronous route we're going to take with Elrond smart contracts, where they can run as long as they need to. You basically post your call to the contract, and you get your result when the contract is completed. And we're partnering with Blockstack on the Clarity programming language to sort of solve that really complicated problem of how do you write provably correct smart contracts that scale and are fast.
Great, Lucian, we got about 30 seconds.
Sure. So I'll be very short. We are looking why the large-scale adoption didn't come in the last 10 years. Identified two things. One is the ease of use of blockchain, especially the public-private key management, and also why blockchain or crypto is not used as a mean of payment. And one of the reasons for this last part is the volatility part, and it's very interesting. The more successful a blockchain it is, and the coin attached, it's the price is rising, and it's most of them are deflationary. And from a rational point of view, most of the users start to perceive it as a store of value rather than a medium of exchange. So we have these very two conflicting states of in the same time. And one of the things that we are looking is how we can solve the things, and this combination with a staking token and a stable coin, and also removing all the barriers for adoption, where the blockchain becomes actually invisible and it's so easy to use, and sending a payment is as easily as sending a text message. We believe that this way we're going to disrupt payments. With crypto, you'll be able to become your own bank, and by doing that, you're going to change the way money actually move around. And this is something that we put a lot of thought in that.
Great. Thank you. We're out of time. Thank you to all of our panelists. I encourage everyone to reach out and ask them any questions if you have further ones.
Thank you very much, Justin. It was great being here.
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.